Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Brighton podcast. It's your boy, Jamie G, joined by Blessings Chabamba. Bless, how are we feeling after a heavy and hard weekend to watch of football?
Yeah, it's been a bit of time since the game, so I've had a chance to actually sort of start forgetting about it. But I'm glad we're doing this podcast to help me remember it all and rehash all of the scars.
Yeah, it's not going to be... I know we've had a bit of time to compose ourselves, but I feel like this podcast is just going to work us up again and get us reminiscing on all the bad things that we did, because, spoiler alert ahead of this podcast, it's not going to be positive for Brighton, and we're going to start. I mean, we might as well just start it straight up. The season's done. Drop the mic. Season's done. European hopes dashed. There's no chance for anything. What do we have to look forward to? Not getting relegated. Result. We're already halfway there.
Oh, I think season's done is a bit too early, but we need to get out this rut because there's going to be better teams coming. And if we're playing like this and we've got a sort of traditional Big Six team coming up against us, then it feels like there's no point of watching at the moment.
Yeah, it's actually a very hard watch. I mean, I think it's time. I know I said it last week, but now I'm being deadly serious. It's time to be a realist. I'm going to stop going on those crossover pods and saying how Brighton are going to smash the other team and how we're going to win every week. No, deadly serious. I'm going to go on to the next week's crossover pod and say, yeah, guys, all you have to do is park the bus against us and you've got an easy win. Park the bus and then just do us on the counter. You've got the easiest win for you. We're basically a B-Tech Man City.
B-Tech Man City. Now, to be honest, we've had a really good ride. I remember sitting on the Manchester United crossover, and I'm like to the Manchester United GSPN guy. I said to him, "Yeah, it's 100% Brighton win. Like it's a definite Brighton win." And it came true. I remember doing this a few times, and we have had a lot of highs. And I just hope and pray that we've not sucked all the goodness out of the season before Christmas. I hope there's still something to shout about in sort of March time at least. Like we something to play for. I want.
Do you know the mad thing is we've actually been cussing out Man United a lot of times over these podcasts. Yeah, they're only 2 points behind us now. It's looking bleak for us.
That's tough, isn't it? That is tough.
When you realise how bad they've been, how good supposedly we've been, it's a tough thing to see us only be 2 points ahead of them. West Ham are another team. They're playing as we actually speak against Bournemouth now, so they've got technically a game in hand. They've been woeful. 5 points behind us. Could be 2 by the end of today. That's where it's like a real reality check. And you spoke about the good times we had at the beginning of the season. I actually urge our listeners to go back and listen to our preview of the season podcast. We predicted this. We said Herzler's going to start off on like a storm. He's going to have a couple games like in the beginning of the season, get on a roll, have a bit of a blinder. Teams aren't going to be familiar with his tactics, probably won't be able to adjust to them. And we kind of predicted that we were going to have a good start to the season. And then we said we're probably going to have a rut at some point in the season. I feel that, this is that point in the season, surely. The problem is that rut is against teams you need to be picking up 3 points against.
Yeah, it's such a weird feeling because where we've come from has been just absolutely unreal, and this feeling sort of reminds me of this going to be the weirdest analogy, but it sort of reminds me of when I was a schoolboy and I used to stay up late to play FIFA. One time, this is crazy. One time, my mum woke me up on a Saturday, and I woke up and I was just so confused. This is how I feel. Because I'm like, what's actually going on? It's Saturday. Do you know what I mean? It's all confusing at the moment. I think it does feel a little bit that we have been sussed out by other teams. I don't know what's going on in Herzler's head. It feels like sometimes he has doubted himself in sort of the decisions he's made and who's playing, and the subs. I feel like he's been getting the subs quite wrong recently as well. So it's like a mixture of so many different things that are just going against us at the moment.
Yeah, and he's such a difficult man to read as well. Like when you see him on the touchline, there's like no expression there. And then when you see him in the post-match interviews, it's a very like blunt, monotone response that you can't really read into anything. He's like very, I guess, kind of honest at times where he just goes, "Yeah, we're not good enough," or things like that. But in terms of seeing if there's actually panic in him or whether he's panicking at all, it's really hard to read him, I feel. There's also, I don't know whether you've seen online, on Twitter, but I mean, it is the most toxic platform ever. People are already calling for him to be sacked. Too early?
Yeah, I think that is absolutely insane. I mean, you can't call for a manager to be sacked if you don't even have anyone good lined up. Like,
Yeah.
realistically, we need to ask these people who are saying this online, who would you get in? Who is out there to get in? And why are we, in fact, why are we even sacking him in the first place after all he's done? Like, come on.
Maybe they'll say bring back Graham Potter.
Yeah, I don't know how well that will go down, to be honest.
No, that would go down. That would go down like lead in water.
Yeah, he took half the staff with him. That is just an awkward. It's like when you break up with your ex, you shouldn't get back together. It's one of them.
Exactly. And to be fair, who would you replace him with? Wolves have just replaced Gary O'Neill with some bloke we're talking off air. Some bloke neither of us have ever heard of. Managed Fenerbahce, Olympiacos, Flamengo, Fluminense, Corinthians for the last like 6 or 7 years. Oh yeah, and Al Shahab, something like that, mid-table Saudi team. So where they've plucked him out from, God knows. But that's the kind of caliber you would have to replace Herzler with, if which will never happen, or not yet anyway. If he was to get sacked. So
yeah, it is. I do find it interesting though. Do you think that if our form continues like this, and then throughout to like March time, we're like not in trouble, but we're like 14th, and the season's sort of flat and dead? Do you think there'll be actual, real voices of cause for him for his head?
I think if this form, and when I say this form, I'm talking about the last 4 games in terms of the 2 draws, 2 losses, carries on, and the performances like stay very consistent in terms of us being pretty poor in front of goal, but still leaking goals at the back, and it reaches like New Year, that's when I think there's serious conversations to be had. But for people to make those calls, what is it? After 4 games of 4 bad games, I guess you can throw the Bournemouth one in there as well because we weren't great, but we were clinical. That's when the calls will come, and that's when, rightly so, question marks will be raised as to whether Herzler, such a young manager as well, how he deals with it and how he kind of adapts to that, and whether we bring someone else in to have new ideas or something like that. So yeah, I just wonder, like, where's it all gone wrong, really? Like, it's in because he's tried changing it a couple times, hasn't he? Like his tactics, we've spoken that before. But like, ultimately, I think he's lost. I think I'm also lost watching, or we're lost watching every game, just thinking, I don't really know what the solution is here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think some people will read into the fact that when we were playing well, we did have players who were just in exceptional form. At the moment, I don't think there's a single Brighton player who's in good form. Like at the start, it was João Pedro. He was in quality form, and then we sort of lost him for a couple of weeks. And Danny Welbeck picked up the baton and was in good form. And then now we've lost Danny Welbeck. João Pedro is just coming back, finding fitness still. There's no one else in really good form. And I think this is why last week we alluded to Matoma and sort of asking more of him. Like he should be that next guy who's going to pick up a bit more form and actually, get on a score sheet, get assists, and sort of get over the line until everyone's fit again. But it just doesn't seem to be the case, to be honest. And it might be a tactical thing or a personnel thing. But like you said, I'm lost too. I'm lost.
we will be in this second segment talking about a potential reason why we're losing so many games and the big man being us missing the big man.
Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs. It's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
And we are back with the Daily Brighton podcast. So, it's been... I know he's not played before we all jump on the comment section saying, how are these men speaking about Danny Welbeck again? But, bless, he's not played and we can't get his name out of our minds and we can't stop talking about him because what a miss he's been. He didn't play against Fulham. We lost 3-1. He didn't play against Leicester. 2-2, bottled that. He didn't play against Crystal Palace. 3-1. I mean, how big of a loss is Danny Welbeck?
Yeah, I think before we went on air, I did say we should name this podcast. We should talk about where Danny Welbeck is. And I said that as a joke, but then when you read out those stats, I started to think maybe it is Danny Welbeck. That's sort of the overarching Danny Welbeck missing. That might be the overarching issue of why these results are not going well, because up front we've just not been able to hold the ball up. It just looks like everyone up front is a bit too weak, getting shrugged off the ball. In a few of our episodes, we talked a lot about long passes going to Danny Welbeck and how we scored from them. Like, without that happening, without Danny Welbeck up there, it's hard for our sort of creative players to sort of get anything to feed off, and those sort of layoffs off the chest and things like that. So we really do need him. I think we've really missed his movement as well. Especially against Palace, we needed someone to sort of move these three centre-backs around and create space for João Pedro. But when he's the focal point, I think we don't look as good up front. I think it's harder for us to keep the ball up front.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, you mentioned that in yesterday's podcast as well, in terms of when João Pedro plays as the lone striker or the focal point up top. I've always felt it as well. And even when he was at Watford and watching him in the Premier League before he came to Brighton, I always felt he's not a striker. I think he's a magic man that can just float in those areas behind a striker, link up with the striker, exactly what João Pedro and Danny Welbeck were doing at the beginning of the season. That's where those two are at their best. And when he's playing as a sole striker, it's so difficult to get his best qualities out, I feel. And that's where I was watching yesterday's game and I just thought the main man we missed is Danny Welbeck, because I've got some stats here for us. In the first half, Pedro, Mitoma, and Minter and Ruta had the fewest touches of the ball of any player in the whole 22 that were on the pitch. And that just screams to me, we miss Danny Welbeck so much, because he's the one, like we've said so many times on this podcast, when we've been raving about him in the past, he's the one that drops deep, links up play, lays it off to people running off him, or plays it in behind to on running Mitoma on the left-hand side, or a Minter when he was playing on the right. He links up with Ruta and Pedro in those little 10 positions, in those spaces. And like you said just then as well, it gives him dropping deep, gives João Pedro an opportunity to then become the last man, which is where he's kind of good at. He's good at running as the last man, or late man runs, or whatever they call it. That's where the link-up play, I think, is seriously missed. And watching that performance yesterday, in that first half, we were struggling so much just to get a couple of passes together. Like, every pass was so either intercepted, or there was kind of no options, there was no movement from anyone. It looked so stagnant, and that's where Danny Welbeck was a massive miss.
Yeah, another thing I'd add as well is just simply his organisation. Like his experience up there, he sets the tone for the press. He works extremely hard, and I think everyone else sees that, and then they will want to match that because at the end of the day, this is a 33 year old Danny Welbeck, and he's working that hard. João Pedro looks at himself and thinks, "Oh, I need to match whatever he's doing."
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's probably not the only issue we've got, but it is a big factor in terms of our output up front and just the whole pattern of play. But how Herzler lines up, it's a big factor because that option, the ball needs to stick up front, and if it's not sticking, it's constantly coming back. Then our midfield gets found out, and it looks a bit naff like it has been recently. Our defense as well have less options, and they look like they're getting found out as well.
Yeah.
So essentially, bring back Welbs.
Do you know what I also think? And it goes on to the end of your point as well. The leadership that he brings, like you say, just him himself, he leads by example. The constant running and pressing that he does, and the constant organising, making sure that people are in the right positions. But just as a leader on the pitch, when things aren't going our way, like that Fulham game where we've conceded a really sloppy goal, and I guess also like the Leicester game where we conceded that sloppy goal late on, I feel like Danny Welbeck would have been really able to steady the ship in that Leicester game. And I guess in yesterday's game, I think he would have been the one that would have reminded the players that this is a derby. This is our biggest game of the season. Get up for it.
Yeah.
And straight from the off, we wouldn't have seen such a flat performance because he would have been the one leading by example and taking the game to Palace. Whereas without him, it looked like I can't emphasize this enough. And I know everyone at home's already watched that game, and they all probably feel the same. And I've said it on yesterday's podcast. It was so flat. They looked like they didn't want to be there for the first half.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up that point because I want to take you back to when we played against Spurs, and I think was it 2-0 down? I'm pretty sure
2-0 at half time.
2-0
Yeah,
down. He was the one sort of raring to go and causing issues in that Spurs box straight away, and winning headers, just being strong. And Spurs have got aggressive centre backs, and for Danny Welbeck to sort of be showing that aggression as well, it's setting the tone. It really does set the tone. And, second half, they came out a different team. I'm not saying it was all Danny Welbeck, but it's the little things that you look for that sort of just bring momentum and rhythm into a game for you. And then anything can happen from there if you can pick up some momentum.
Yeah, we scored in the first 3 minutes of that half as well. So yeah, 100% to your point that he would have been a big difference maker in that dressing room at half time, telling the lads to probably get their act together. In this next segment, we're going to be talking about another place where I feel like we also missed Danny Welbeck. We spoke about how we use him to build up so much, and yesterday that just wasn't there.
This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network, every club, every day.
And we are back with the daily Brighton podcast. So we alluded to it before we went to that ad break. And yesterday, it looked like, I don't know whether it was intentional because we didn't have Danny Welbeck, but there was a clear emphasis, I felt, from the off to play long and play direct. I don't know how you feel about this, Bless, but there were so many chances in yesterday's game. So if you think about as early as the 12th minute where Minter is just played in behind the defence and Dean Henderson runs out and almost takes him out. That almost clatters him to win as a foul. That was the first indication where I thought, oh, we actually might be going long today. Then I think it was only like 5 minutes later where João Pedro went through like an in behind ball. Van Hecker was constantly looking for those in behind balls where unfortunately they were either intercepted or Van Hecker by his standards pretty poor, but kicked out of play. Then there was Verbruggen, which I was so unused to. 34th minute, I jotted it down the minute because I was shocked by it. Hoofed it up there, just absolute hoof up the pitch to try and just get it to Pedro. Didn't get to Pedro, and then there was another chance where in that first half, Baliba plays it long to Mitoma. Those are 5 different occasions where we just played complete long ball, and it looked like that was a clear emphasis that maybe Herzler found a weakness or what he thought was a weakness in the Crystal Palace team. Didn't prove to be in the end because we weren't able to capitalise. But I just wonder what you think about that. Do you think it was intentional?
Yeah, I think definitely was intentional because from what we've sort of seen from the manager is he wants to control games, he wants to play out from the back, control the tempo of games. So to be sending the ball up long is definitely a tactic because you wouldn't want to give away possession that cheaply. It would literally tell him to stop doing that. What I do think the idea perhaps might have been behind it is that because Palace obviously play with a back three, he's trying to catch out the wing backs. That could be the only reason. I think if they've gone long early and you've somehow got a situation where Matoma is 1-on-1 with a right centre back like Chalobah, you back Matoma to get past him, really, wouldn't you? But the issue with that is João Pedro isn't that guy. He's not going to be chesting the ball down, plucking it out of the air, or flicking it on and winning headers against players like Mark Guehi. Like, it's just not really going to happen. So I don't know whether it was maybe like just a let's just do it and see what happens kind of tactic, or maybe they were expecting Welbeck to be fit for this one, and this is what they've been working on in training. But certainly the idea was to try and hurt them in wide areas because even Mente started as well. Using that pace, that 1v1 ability. But yeah, it just didn't work out. I think it was it would have been nicer for them to maybe stick to their roots a little bit more and just make Palace work a bit harder to get the ball back by keeping it short. But yeah, a tough watch.
Yeah, I mean, to that point as well, we mentioned it on yesterday's podcast that it looked like every time the Brighton forwards were pinned up against one of the centre-backs, it was mainly Lacroix, because he was class yesterday, to be fair to him, they just got tackled every time. Like, I think there was such a tall order for Pedro to be that man in behind, to be that lone striker, especially if they're just going to go long to him. They're not going to really work off him at all. That's not the way forward, or that wasn't the way forward. But yeah, it's just an interesting one. And you could kind of see in the second half, they switched up massively, went to that 3 in the back, and much more possession-based in that second half, especially at the beginning of the second half. I think said yesterday, 87% possession in the first 15 minutes of that half. There looked a much more clear idea where Herzler went back in the change room, probably realised, I've got this wrong here. Let's change to a back 3 and let's play complete possession style football. And that's when we actually looked bright. That's when we looked like the old Brighton, pinging it to each other, 1-touch, 2-touch football in and around those middle areas and getting the ball out wide. And that's where we were more dangerous, I would say.
The thing is, though, like, it's all well and good to sort of talk about the tactics, but the players simply aren't applying themselves. And like, how much would you put the emphasis on the tactics? Do you think it is acceptable to get it wrong in such a big game like this? Because I guess that's where a lot of people who are calling for his head might be coming from.
Yeah, see, I think in a game like this, to experiment, to go against everything that you've done in so far this season, although a couple of games, sure, we've played this kind of style of football, that's where you can't be doing it. Not against our biggest rivals, not against a team where you need to win. You need to start picking up form. That's where you should surely stick to your roots and then hopefully get a result out of it. And don't be so exposed. Because like you say, every time we hoofed it up there, lost it, and then they were back onto us. I mean, it was a tough watch. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I'd love to be in the sort of change rooms and
Fly on
hearing
the
what
wall.
the tactic, fly on the wall kind of thing, hearing what he's asking of them because there's just it seems like there is a lack of clarity in what the actual purpose is at the moment, and that there has to be a reason behind that. I think I can't imagine it's just for the sake of chopping and changing. He just wants to mix it up. There must be a reason behind that. Maybe, obviously, he's trying to fix the issues we've spoken about. Danny Welbeck's absent, but it gets to a point where you're like, this is where I think I lean more on asking more of the players. I think we've talked a lot about João Pedro as well, but Ruta as well. He didn't look a player at all. Mente, again, disappointing. So it's like, I think it's a real good mixed blend of getting it wrong tactically and also the players just not being up for a big game and a big occasion.
Yeah, I think, I do have to say, I don't want to put it all on Herzler and his tactics because, like you say, there were so many bad performances out there. Ayari, I'm a big fan of Ayari, went missing. He might as well just not been there because he got ran ragged. I don't think I really recall him doing anything, which is the worst sign, I reckon, as a footballer. To be completely, no one speaks about you because they don't know you're there. That's kind of the Ayari performance that we got yesterday. Baliba had flashes. Ruta, I'm a big fan of him. I was a big fan of the signing. He was poor yesterday. Did not get involved at all. Wasn't creative. Every time he got the ball, lost it. Had his work rate to an extent, but not the usual energy that we are used to. Minter, don't even get me started on this. This guy, he's such a letdown. He had
He was meant to be my golden boy as well.
oh no, it took him bleak.
Hanging my head in shame. I got that one wrong. I'm so sorry, everyone.
Yeah. He's having a torrid time, I've got to say. And every time on commentary they go, "Oh, Minter, the wonder boy that they stole off Newcastle." I'm not like, we didn't steal him. We got robbed. That's basically what's happened.
I haven't lost faith yet. But,
no, he's still young. That's a positive. He's still young. But and then we spoke about the back four yesterday. I don't want to rehash bad memories for our listeners, but good God, what were they doing? It is massively individual errors, and that's where I probably see that straight look that Herzler has on the sideline. It's probably the look of, what are these men doing? what are these men doing?
Yeah, I can imagine that when Tariq Lamptey just stacks it and falls on his bum. Yeah, that's definitely the response I would have had.
Exactly. And when Lewis Dunk is trying to header it twice and has his feet stuck in cement, I mean, that's probably a call for him going, "Yep, I need a lot of investment in this squad."
Yeah.
But there we go. That's we've made it through 2 podcasts, bless. That's the positive of this weekend, is we've actually survived without crying, talking about how bad we were against our biggest rivals, and vengeance will be had at Selhurst Park. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope so. And when that happens, again, I will always call for a Danny Welbeck hat trick. But if that, that's what I want to see. It's what the fans deserve.
We just need him fit, to be honest. Just get him fit again. I just need to see Danny Welbeck just in the starting lineup, or just in and around the squad. That would be nice.
Get him a coaching role as well, Simon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get him out the rehab room, out the medical room, or for whatever knock he has, and get him coaching, get him inspiring the young players that we have. And there we go. That's our note to Herzler. We know he pays attention to this podcast. And so to you, Fabian, see you next time. Peace.
Thanks for
Every
listening.
club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.